What connects a hair-curling iron, a simple mousetrap, and the most lethal weapon of the Victorian age? One man, Sir Hiram Maxim. He was the engineer who began his career styling hair and finished it by teaching the world how to kill at 600 rounds per minute. This is the story of how a genius transformed into the merchant of death. September 2nd, 1898. The scorching heat of the Sudanese desert. 10,000 warriors charge across the sand, weapons raised, screaming for glory. But the British line opposite them doesn't flinch. They don't charge. They simply turn a crank. A sound never heard before in human history tears the air. Not a bang, but a continuous mechanical ripping noise, like canvas being torn by a giant hand. 600 rounds per minute. By sunset, the desert floor is no longer sand. It is a carpet of 11,000 bodies. The British force lost fewer than 50 men. It wasn't a battle. It was a mathematical equation of death, solved by a machine. The man who wrote that equation wasn't a general or a king. He was a white-bearded American tinkerer who spent his mornings designing curling irons for women's hair and inhalers for bronchitis. But Hiram Maxim had a secret. Years earlier, a friend in Vienna gave him a piece of advice that would eventually drown the 20th century in blood. If you want to make a pile of money, invent something that will enable these Europeans to cut each other's throats with greater facility. He listened. Long before the world knew him as a merchant of death, Hiram Maxim was simply a man who could not stop his hands from moving. Born into the freezing poverty of rural Maine, he was the quintessential American underdog, uneducated, rough-edged, and possessed by a manic, almost feverish need to fix things. He didn't see the world in landscapes or emotions. He saw it in gears, levers, and wasted motion. Consider his very first stroke of genius. It wasn't a weapon, but a solution to a pest problem in a grist mill. He designed a mousetrap. But Maxim didn't just want to catch a mouse. He wanted to automate the process. His device caught the rodent, disposed of it, and, crucially, reset its own spring, waiting silently for the next victim. It was a mechanical loop of execution. At the time, it seemed like a clever novelty, but looking back, it was a terrifying blueprint for his future. He was already obsessed with the cycle: fire, eject, reload, repeat. By his 20s, Maxim was a whirlwind of eccentric creativity. In 1866, he patented a hair-curling iron, a device still found in bathrooms today. He designed gas lamps and locomotive headlights. By the late 1870s, he was standing in the center of New York City, installing the first electric lights in the Equitable Life Building. He was on the verge of becoming the American hero of progress. But there was a shadow looming over his career, a rival who cast a darkness that Maxim couldn't engineer his way out of. Thomas Edison. Maxim was a brilliant engineer, but Edison was a ruthless businessman. They clashed violently over the patents for the incandescent light bulb. Maxim had the better chemistry. He had solved the problem of the carbon filament, but Edison had the lawyers. Through a series of brutal legal maneuvers and corporate bullying, Edison effectively erased Maxim from the history of electricity. Maxim was left humiliated. He had the genius, but he didn't have the empire. He felt robbed, convinced that his country had chewed him up and spit him out. Bitter and disillusioned, he packed his bags and boarded a ship for London. He left America as a failed electrician with a bruised ego, unaware that he was sailing toward a destiny that would turn his mechanical obsession into a global nightmare. The inventor of the hair curler was about to learn that saving lives doesn't pay nearly as well as ending them. London, 1882. Maxim is 42 years old, wandering the streets of a city that smells of coal smoke and empire. He is looking for a direction. He finds it not in a laboratory, but in a casual remark from a fellow American in Vienna. The man tells him to forget chemistry and electricity. The real money, he whispers, is in helping these Europeans kill each other. The words stick. Maxim retreats to his workshop in Hatton Garden, dragging a ghost from his childhood with him. He remembers a day in Maine, firing a heavy Springfield rifle. The recoil was so violent it left his shoulder black and blue for days. Most men would have rubbed the bruise and complained. Maxim realized he had been hit by wasted energy. He realized the gun was trying to push back, and he had been standing in its way. He begins to sketch. The concept is radically simple, yet terrifyingly complex. Until this moment, guns were manual labor. You loaded, you fired, you worked a lever, you cranked a handle. It was slow. It was human. Maxim looks at the explosion inside the chamber and sees an engine. He designs a floating barrel that moves backward with every shot, harnessing that violent kick to eject the empty shell, pull a new bullet from a canvas belt, cock the firing pin, and pull the trigger again. He creates a closed loop. As long as you hold your finger down, the machine feeds itself. It breathes fire. It doesn't need a soldier's bravery. It only needs an operator's finger. The test comes in his garden. He invites the elite of the British military to witness the future. He sets up the heavy, water-cooled tripod in front of a thick oak tree. He doesn't aim at a paper target. He aims at the trunk. He presses the trigger. The noise is deafening, a continuous mechanical roar that sounds like a piece of heavy canvas being ripped apart by a giant. In seconds, the tree doesn't just splinter, it is severed in half, sawdust spraying the air like a mist. The British officers stand in stunned silence, staring at the fallen timber. They aren't looking at a weapon. They are looking at the end of the cavalry charge. They are looking at the industrialization of death. The money follows instantly. He forms the Maxim Gun Company. Investors who wouldn't touch his electric lamps are now throwing cash at his feet. By the time he merges his company a few years later, the valuation hits nearly £2 million. That is a staggering $300 million in today's money. The former carriage painter is now a tycoon. He drinks champagne with royalty, the bitter memory of Edison fading with every check he cashes. He has successfully productized the apocalypse. With the money came the title. The barefoot boy from Maine became Sir Hiram Maxim, Knight of the Realm. But the knighthood was just a mask. Behind the velvet curtains of his London mansion, Maxim's ego was ballooning into something dangerous. He began to believe that the laws of physics were just suggestions he could ignore. In 1894, a full decade before the Wright brothers, Maxim decided he would conquer the sky. But he didn't build a delicate glider. He built a monster. He constructed a 3.5-ton biplane powered by massive steam engines. It was essentially a flying locomotive. During the test run at Baldwin's Park, the machine didn't just lift, it tore violently upward. It generated so much lift that it ripped through the heavy wooden guardrails designed to keep it on the track. Maxim had to cut the steam to stop it from launching uncontrolled into the stratosphere. He had built a machine so powerful that his only solution was to chain it to the ground. It was a perfect metaphor for the man himself. Immense power, zero control. But while he was trying to leave the earth, his life on the ground was unraveling. The press loved the king of machine guns, but in the shadows, paranoia was festering. Across the Atlantic, a man named Hudson Maxim, his own brother, was waging a war of words against him. Hudson, an inventor of high explosives, claimed Hiram had stolen his ideas for smokeless powder. They waged a public war of words through newspaper columns. And then there were the women. Rumors circulated in the press that Sir Hiram was a bigamist, that he had left a wife in New York to marry another in London, never bothering with the legal inconvenience of a divorce. An imposter even appeared in the States, posing as Maxim to swindle investors, blurring the line between the real genius and the fraud. Maxim was winning the patent wars, but he was losing his senses, quite literally. Years of standing next to his gun, refusing ear protection to monitor the mechanism, had destroyed his hearing. He was becoming isolated in a silent world of his own making, surrounded by enemies real and imagined, unaware that the weapon he created was about to leave his garden and set the world on fire. While Maxim played the eccentric genius in the manicured gardens of Kent, his invention was hard at work in the dust and flies of the colonies. The machine gun had ceased to be a curiosity. It had become the backbone of the scramble for Africa. The sales pitch was brutally simple. Maxim didn't care about politics or flags. He sold to the British, the Germans, the Russians. If you had the gold, he had the gun. He sat in his office reviewing purchase orders while the product delivered its promise thousands of miles away. The cynical chant of the British officer corps echoed in the mess halls. "Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not." September 2nd, 1898. The sun rises over Omdurman in the Sudan. General Kitchener's army waits behind a thorn bush barricade. Facing them is the Mahdist army, over 50,000 men dressed in white jibbahs, armed with swords, spears, and antique rifles. They believe in courage. They believe in destiny. At 6:30 a.m., the white wave begins to move. They charge. It is a terrifying display of human bravery. But on the British line, the soldiers aren't trembling. They are checking coolant levels. They are straightening canvas belts. When the order comes, they don't aim. They simply sweep. The brass casings pile up around their boots like drifts of metallic snow. The water in the cooling jackets boils, sending plumes of steam into the desert air, mixing with the smell of cordite. It isn't a fight. It is an industrial process. The Mahdist warriors are cut down in rows, like wheat before a scythe. Not a single Sudanese soldier gets within 50 yards of the British line. By noon, 11,000 bodies are rotting in the heat. The British casualties? 48. Back in London, the newspapers celebrate a glorious victory. Maxim reads the reports, but he doesn't see the tragedy. He sees validation. He had claimed his weapon would make war too terrible to fight, but in reality, he had just made it too easy to ignore. The balance of power had shifted forever. Bravery was obsolete. The machine had won. The 20th century dawns, but the noise of the machine gun has faded for Hiram Maxim. Not because the wars have stopped, they are just beginning, but because the inventor is now stone deaf. The relentless hammering of his own creation has destroyed his hearing, leaving him trapped in a silent film of his own life. In his final years, the Knight of the Realm retreats to a new obsession. He sits in his study, wheezing, clutching a fragile blue glass tube. He isn't holding a weapon. He is holding a menthol inhaler. Suffering from chronic bronchitis, Maxim invents a device to vaporize therapeutic oils. He calls it the pipe of peace. It is a grotesque irony that the world finds impossible to swallow. The man who industrialized slaughter is now trying to help people breathe. The press mocks him mercilessly. Critics accuse him of trying to scrub the blood from his hands with menthol vapor. Maxim, stubborn to the end, slams his fist on the table. He writes angry letters, insisting that his inhaler is his greatest work, screaming into the void that this glass tube will save more lives than his gun ever took. He is wrong. Maxim dies in his bed in London on November 24, 1916. He passes away peacefully, his chest finally still. But across the English Channel, the ground is shaking. The Battle of the Somme is raging. In the mud of France, thousands of British and German variations of Maxim's gun are facing each other. In a single day, 60,000 men are chewed up by the mechanism he designed in his garden. The inventor dies in silence, while his invention screams louder than ever before. Hiram Maxim was the prototype for the modern tech bro, the genius who believes that engineering can solve the human condition. He looked at war and saw an inefficiency to be optimized. He looked at a mouse and saw a cycle to be automated. He believed that if he made a weapon terrible enough, humanity would simply choose peace out of logic, but he forgot to factor in the human soul. He didn't end war. He just scaled it. Today, the Maxim gun is a museum piece, but its ghost is everywhere. You see it in the automated drone hovering over a battlefield, making decisions in milliseconds. You see it in the algorithm that trades stocks faster than human thought. It is the belief that we can build systems that serve us, only to find ourselves enslaved by their efficiency. Maxim began his life by building a trap that would catch a mouse, reset itself, and wait for the next victim. In the end, he did the exact same thing for humanity. We are still caught in his loop, waiting for the spring to snap. Hiram Maxim died believing he was a healer, but history has rendered its verdict. He is not remembered as the man who helped the world breathe. He is the man who taught us how to stop breathing by the millions at 600 rounds per minute. Hiram Maxim left us a warning written in gunpowder. Progress without morality is just a more efficient way to die. If you value this kind of unfiltered history, please leave a like and make sure to subscribe. We are just scratching the surface of the industrial age. I'll see you there.